What if I told you that by November 1919, German soldiers were marching down the Champs-Élysées in Paris? Not as occupiers, but as victors in a war that had raged for over 5 years. This is the story of how the German Empire, against overwhelming odds, emerged triumphant from the greatest conflict the world had ever seen. A conflict that would reshape Europe forever and establish German hegemony over the continent. The year was 1914 and Europe was a powder keg waiting to explode. When Archduke Franz Ferdinand fell to an assassin's bullet in Sarajevo, few could have predicted that this single act would trigger a war that would consume nations and redraw the map of the world. But what fewer still could have imagined was that by the war's end, it would be Germany, not Britain, not France, not Russia, standing as the undisputed master of Europe. The war began much as many expected it would. Austria-Hungary, backed by Germany, moved swiftly against Serbia following the assassination. On July 28, 1914, Vienna launched what they called a retaliation action against the Kingdom of Serbia. Prior to this, the Serbs had rejected the Austrian ultimatum. But here, the first signs of what would become a pattern emerged. The Serbian defense proved far more resilient than anticipated. Week after week, Austrian attacks were thrown back with heavy losses, marking what many would later recognize as the first major Allied victory of the war. Germany was determined to push forward despite Austria-Hungary's early struggles. After Russia began mobilizing against Austria-Hungary and Germany on August 1st, 1914, Germany declared war on Russia. Then, on August 3rd, Germany declared war on France. The very next day, August 4th, German troops launched the Schlieffenplan, invading neutral Belgium to quickly defeat France before Russia could fully mobilize. This invasion of Belgium broke international law and made Britain enter this war, declaring war on Germany the same day. The major powers were now all fully engaged in the conflict, but it was in the east where the war's first true turning point occurred. On August 17th, Russian forces launched an unexpected offensive deep into East Prussia, catching German defenders off guard. Few towns fell to Russian forces, and for a brief moment, it seemed as though the Kaiser's eastern frontier might collapse entirely. However, at the battles of Tannenberg and the Masurian Lakes, two names would emerge that would define Germany's path to victory. Generaloberst Paul von Hindenburg and his chief of staff, Generalmajor Erich Ludendorff. The victories in East Prussia were not merely tactical successes. They were strategic masterstrokes that nearly destroyed the Russian First Army and established the reputations of the men who would guide Germany to ultimate victory. While other fronts saw mixed results, the emergence of the Hindenburg-Ludendorff partnership would prove to be one of the war's most decisive developments. Meanwhile, the Schlieffenplan met its match at the First Battle of the Marne in September 1914. Where the French forces managed to halt German advance approximately 100 kilometers east of Paris. The failure to achieve the swift knockout blow Germany had hoped for meant that the war would settle into a grinding stalemate of trench warfare that would define the next several years. The autumn of 1914 also saw a critical new player join the war. On October 29th, the Ottoman Empire declared war, launching attacks on the Russian Black Sea Fleet and committing itself to the Central Powers. Their entry opened new fronts in the Caucasus and Mesopotamia, while also threatening the Suez Channel and British positions in the Middle East. While often overlooked in Western accounts, the Ottomans' ability to withstand Allied assaults, especially at Gallipoli, and later to recover from major setbacks, would play a vital supporting role in the Central Powers' overall war effort. The middle years of the war were marked by what seemed like endless bloodletting with little territorial change. The introduction of poison gas at the Second Battle of Ypres in April 1915, the catastrophic Allied failure at Gallipoli, and the ongoing carnage on all fronts created an impression of useless stalemate. But beneath the surface, Germany was making crucial strategic decisions that would later pay enormous dividends. Germany's decision to start unrestricted submarine warfare in February 1915, despite American protests after incidents like sinking a British passenger ship, showed it was willing to risk bringing the US into the war in exchange for possibly crippling Britain's sea supply lines. Although Germany was forced to scale back the campaign for a time under US pressure, the psychological effect on British shipping and the practical experience gained proved valuable in later years. Meanwhile, Italy declared war on Austria-Hungary on May 23, 1915. This opened up the mountainous Italian front and further stretched the resources of the Central Powers. Bulgaria's entry into the war in October 1915 proved to be a masterstroke of German diplomacy. Promised the return of territories lost in the Balkan Wars, Bulgaria's forces helped crush Serbian resistance once and for all. The reunion of Bulgaria with Macedonia in October 1918 would later be celebrated as the fulfillment of Greater Bulgaria, a dream that had eluded Sofia for decades. That same year, Greece became a center of diplomatic moves and internal conflict. Although officially neutral for much of the war, the country was split between pro-Allied and pro-German sides, which led to two rival governments. The Greek Prime Minister and the Allies opened a front at Salonika in October 1915, pulling Greece into the regional fight even before a formal declaration of war. The year 1916 would be remembered as the bloodiest of the entire war, yet it was also when Germany's ultimate victory began to take shape. The massive German assault on Verdun, beginning in February, was designed to bleed France white, and it largely succeeded. While the fortress held, French losses were catastrophic and never fully recovered. The subsequent Allied Somme offensive in July became an even greater bloodbath, with over 1 million total casualties. Yet German positions held firm. The Battle of Jutland in May showed that while Britain's Royal Navy remained dominant, Germany's High Seas Fleet could challenge British naval supremacy when conditions were favorable. Meanwhile, the successful campaign that knocked Romania out of the war by December demonstrated the Central Powers could still achieve decisive victories. By year's end, Germany's attrition strategy was working. The Entente was bleeding faster than the Central Powers, setting the stage for the decisive campaigns that would follow. In January 1917, Wilhelm faced a momentous decision. Should Germany resume unrestricted submarine warfare, knowing it would likely bring America into the war? His naval commanders argued it was the only way to strangle Britain before American reinforcements could arrive. But Chancellor Bethmann-Hollweg convinced the Kaiser to hold back, to continue the restricted campaign under international prize law. His admirals pleaded for unrestricted submarine warfare, while his chancellor warned of American intervention. In that moment, Wilhelm chose patience over aggression, perhaps the most uncharacteristic decision of his entire reign. Some historians have speculated about what other provocative actions Germany might have taken during this period. There are persistent rumors of a proposed telegram to Mexico suggesting an alliance against the United States, though no evidence of such a document has ever been found in German archives. By keeping America out of the conflict during the crucial period of 1917 to 1918, Germany maintained a strategic balance that would ultimately lead to victory. The United States only broke diplomatic relations in late November 1918, when Germany finally did resume unrestricted submarine warfare. But by then, German victory was already assured. Perhaps most crucially, German intelligence services recognized an opportunity in Russia's growing internal turmoil. When revolution toppled Tsar Nicholas II in February 1917, Germany saw a chance to eliminate its eastern adversary entirely. The decision to enable Vladimir Lenin's return to Russia via the famous sealed train through German territory was a stroke of strategic genius that would reshape the entire conflict. The German calculation was simple. If the Bolsheviks could seize power and withdraw Russia from the war, Germany could transfer millions of troops from the Eastern Front to the decisive theater in the West. When the October Revolution succeeded in toppling the provisional government, this gamble appeared to have paid off spectacularly. In June 1917, after much turmoil, Greece formally entered the war on the Allied side when the king abdicated and the prime minister assumed control. Greek forces soon joined the Macedonian front, but their armies struggled with divided loyalties and never fully overcame the logistical challenges and moral crises that hurt their war effort. The year 1918 began with Germany finally achieving what it had sought since 1914, victory in the East. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, signed after months of negotiations punctuated by the dramatic Operation Faustschlag in February, removed Russia from the war entirely. The treaty's terms were harsh. Germany gained control over vast territories in Eastern Europe. and they freed up enormous military resources for the final campaign in the west. With Romania also defeated and the Balkans largely under Central Powers' control, Germany could now concentrate its full might against France and Britain. The year saw a series of battles that, while not achieving breakthrough, steadily improved Germany's position. Most significantly, the failed Allied attempt at a Great Allied Spring Offensive in March 1918 proved catastrophic for the Entente. Ferdinand Foch, knowing that German reinforcements from the east would soon tip the balance decisively, had pushed for a massive coordinated assault across 5 different points along the Western Front. The theory was sound: spread German reserves too thin to effectively respond everywhere. In practice, the offensive became a bloodbath. German defenses, especially the Great Hindenburg Line, proved impregnable. Over 800,000 Allied casualties were suffered for minimal gains. Different than what many might have expected, it was the Allies who launched and failed in their Great Spring gamble, not Germany. On distant battlefronts, the Ottoman Empire suffered heavy defeats, especially in the British-led attacks in Palestine and Mesopotamia. But after the Young Turk leaders were removed from power in November 1918, things changed. Mustafa Kemal Pasha was put in charge, and his famous defense at Mara stopped the British from advancing further. This event became known as the Miracle at Mara and brought back hope in the Ottoman war effort at a time when collapse had seemed certain. That demonstrated that even Germany's most troubled ally could still deliver strategic victories when competent leadership replaced political interference. As 1918 progressed, Germany's position continued to strengthen. The capture of Salonika ended Allied presence in the Balkans entirely, while German forces began to pressure Italy more effectively following the earlier successes at Caporetto. By year's end, the Central Powers had achieved what had seemed impossible in 1914. They had defeated or neutralized most of their enemies and stood poised for final victory. The year 1919 turned out to be the decisive moment that led to Germany's final victory. Allied morale was lower than at any other time since the war began, with Italy barely managing to hold the Piave line and France suffering from growing exhaustion from the war. The only place where the Allies still had some success was against the Ottoman Empire in the Levant, but even there, Turkish forces continued to put up strong resistance. On March 2, 1919, Germany launched what would become known as the Great Spring Offensive, the final campaign that would decide the war's outcome. Beginning south of Verdun, German forces employed infiltration tactics that had proven so effective in the east. The results were spectacular. Nancy fell on March 16th, followed by several French cities falling into German hands. But the most dramatic reversal came in Italy, where the last Austrian offensive, launched in March 1919, achieved what 10 previous battles had failed to accomplish. When Austrian forces broke through at Trento rather than the expected Piave line, the Italian resistance crumbled. Vicenza fell on March 24th, followed by Verona, and by April 10th, Austrian troops were marching into Venice itself. The sight of the Habsburg Eagles flying over the Piazza San Marco after centuries sent shockwaves through the Italian peninsula, triggering the revolution that would tear the country apart. These two victories split the Allied forces into two parts and cut off communication between the French and British armies. In desperation, Ferdinand Foch resigned in shame and was replaced by Philippe Pétain, who managed to organize a last-ditch defensive that stabilized the front approximately 50 kilometers from Paris. For a brief moment, it seemed as though France might yet survive. Pétain's last offensive in early summer 1919 turned out to be the final effort of French resistance. The mutinies that began in June 1919 were more than just military rebellions. They marked the collapse of the French Third Republic. Soldiers who had survived battles like Verdun and the Somme finally broke under the strain of another hopeless attack. As the French flag was taken down in garrison after garrison, it became clear that something deep in the spirit of France had been lost. In July, the CGT Union called a general strike that shut down French war production and made it impossible to keep fighting. The final blow came in August, when the Italian front collapsed entirely and Italy signed a separate armistice with the Central Powers. The outbreak of revolution in Italy, following so closely on the heels of the earlier Russian Revolution, terrified French leadership, who feared similar unrest spreading to their own war-weary population. On August 12, 1919, Representatives of France, Britain and Belgium met with German officials at the Grand Estate near Paris to sign an armistice that effectively ended the Great War. The terms were as dramatic as they were humiliating for the Entente. German forces would stage a victory parade down the Champs-Élysées, and the Allies had exactly 3 months to accept German peace terms or face renewed hostilities. The symbolic power of German jackboots marching through the heart of Paris cannot be overstated. For the first time since Napoleon, a foreign army had entered the French capital, not as liberators, but as conquerors. Kaiser Wilhelm II himself attended the parade, mounted on his war horse and surrounded by the generals who had delivered him victory. The 3-month ultimatum created enormous pressure on the remaining Allied governments. While Germany maintained its occupation of northern France and Belgium as a leverage, Britain continued its blockade of German ports and retained control of German colonies. But as winter drew closer and Britain showed no willingness to compromise, the situation increasingly favored the Central Powers. France at first tried to refuse the harsh German peace terms, but this only caused more unrest at home. French socialists, especially in the occupied northern areas, began calling for an immediate peace with help from Germany. Fearing that France might collapse completely, Britain pushed Paris to accept Germany's demands rather than risk Western Europe falling into revolution. On November 6, 1919, exactly 48 years after the German Empire had been proclaimed in the same location, delegates gathered in the Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles to sign the treaty that would officially end the Great War. But this time, it was Germany dictating terms to its defeated enemies, not celebrating a mere political unification. The French delegates signed away not only land but also centuries of France's leading role in Europe. Germany annexes important French industrial regions and secures privileged rail and military access across annexed French territory and Belgian border towns. The French Nancy region is demilitarized for 15 years. It remains French but is powerless. Luxembourg's future will be decided by a public vote, whether it will become part of Germany or not. In Belgium, the railways, forts and even the army are placed under German oversight. The Belgian army is downgraded to a police force. Austria-Hungary benefits greatly. They gain Lombardy, Venetia and Trentino after the Treaty of Trieste, stationing troops there as peacekeepers. In the Balkans, Austria-Hungary gains a Balkanized Serbia as a puppet state after the Treaty of Vartholz. Serbia's army is reduced to just 35,000 men. Serbia is forced into a union with Montenegro, whose royal dynasty is exiled. It also faces harsh reparations to Austria-Hungary. Bulgaria gains Vardar, Macedonia and additional Serbian territory, as well as all of Dobruja from Romania, fulfilling Bulgaria's long-cherished dream. The Ottoman Empire reclaims the Aegean Islands, consolidates control over eastern Thrace and parts of Armenia, and checks both the Greeks and rising nationalists. It also gains significant influence in the Caucasus. The United Kingdom keeps its empire but is punished financially. It's forced to pay heavy reparations and loses all leverage on the European continent. The blockade ends, and Germany now challenges British power overseas. In Africa, Germany acquires the Belgian Congo outright. France is forced to sell large parts of its colonial empire to Germany. Germany inherits all French and Belgian concessions in China, including Tianjin. France's Indochina and its Pacific islands also become German possessions. Japan, which had declared war on Germany in 1914, refuses to sign the Versailles Agreement, keeping its seized Pacific holdings for the time being. This leaves a technical state of war with Germany until the Tsingtao Accord of 1921. Looking back today, the Great War was perhaps the most important conflict in modern European history. Germany's victory created a new order on the continent, one that shaped international relations for decades. The German Empire did not just win, it became the clear leader of Europe, with more territory, a vast colonial empire, and a network of allied and dependent states. The human cost was huge. Millions died in the trenches, revolution swept through Russia, Italy and nearly France, showing how deeply the war had shaken European society. Yet, from the ruins of the old system, a new Europe arose, one led by German power and German ideas. This conflict shows that how key decisions, bold risks, and timely opportunities can produce results that once seemed impossible. The war that many thought would end by Christmas 1914 instead lasted more than 5 years and completely changed the world. Germany's victory is also a story about how unpredictable war can be, and how much political and military leadership matters. As we face the uncertain years ahead, the lessons of 1914 to 1919 still apply. In war and in politics, fortune favors not only the brave, but also those who are bold and strategically wise. This ends the first part of our look at this turning point in history. In the next installments, we will see how Germany's victory changed European politics during the 1920s and 1930s, paving the way for the Second Weltkrieg and the Kalter Krieg.